Hey, Dr. Briggs. So my research was on transgender athletics, and allowing whether or not we should allow transgender people to participate in athletics. My notes are behind my phone, so that's what I'm looking at and scrolling through and stuff. And also, if there's noises, my roommate is moving out of her room, and there's a dog in the house, so there's just a lot of hustle and bustle. Also, I've done this like 30 times, so let's see how this one goes. Okay, so today's society argues that humans have the right to fight for their happiness, despite what the status quo or other people or religion has to say. This has pushed the transgender movement. Webster Dictionary defines transgender as of, relating to, or being a person whose gender identity differs from the sex the person had or was identified as having at birth. This transgender movement, or the transgender rights movement, is a movement that promotes transgender rights, oddly enough, and works to eliminate discrimination and violence against transgender people. One of those rights is the right to compete in their sport as their preferred gender, so not the gender that they were born with again. This research that I've done will discuss the facts and the positives and the negatives in allowing transgendered men and women to compete as their preferred gender. The underlying message of transgenderism is inclusion and comfortability. When asked how people know if they're transgender, it is responded with, some people can trace their awareness back to their earlier memories, they just know. Others may need more time to realize that they're transgender. Some may need to spend years feeling like they don't fit or not really understanding why, or may try to avoid thinking or talking about their gender out of fear or shame or confusion. But it is a basic need for people to feel loved and understood, obviously. So if you don't feel both of those in your current situation, in your body, most people feel like that's enough of a reason to evaluate your gender identity. So Cece Telfer was a track athlete at Franklin Pierce University who ran as both on the women's and the men's team. Men's and then the women's team, the track team. And during college, she was able to express herself as a woman more and more, feeling more comfortable with who she was instead of who he was, gaining friends and creating a family within that community that accepted her as Cece instead of Craig. She stated around her freshman year, Cece visited Planned Parenthood and asked for birth control, and she was desperate to become more feminine, and she yearned for any estrogen she should get. And a nurse, picking up on Telfer's plan, informed the student about the organization's transgender policy. And Telfer began seeing a doctor who guided her through hormone treatment, which is a regimen that involves daily doses of different hormones. It blocks testosterone in your body and pretty much producing more and more estrogen. And she saw a therapist throughout college and was able to feel more comfortable with who she was. However, what hurt her the most was track, since she could not fully be herself on the track since she had to compete as a male. And Cece said that it was stifling and felt that it was difficult to continue with the tension between who she was and who she wanted to be, and how that clashed on the track. The school in the Northeast 10 Conference staff, the NCAA national office staff, and fellow schools and lawyers got together to create a transgender policy for athletics as well as institution-wide. So just because the rules say it's okay for her to compete doesn't mean the world is going to agree with those rules, obviously. So Cece and countless other athletes face discrimination constantly, as well as Mac Beggs, who's a transgendered female, so going from male to female. And she is one of them. Mac is a 19-year-old at Euless Trinity High School in Texas who's won the Texas Girls 6A 110-pound division in wrestling. Beggs, which is her nickname, her family has repeatedly said that he wants to wrestle boys because he wants to become a boy. The birth certificate rule in Texas, which states that whatever you are in your birth certificate is what you're going to compete as. That rule was approved in 2016 by the University Interscholastic League, or the UIL, the governing body for Texas high schools. And the UIL, this is explaining it. So the UIL birth certificate rule states the UIL rule, which is set by representatives of member school districts across Texas, states that gender will be determined based on students' birth certificate for the purpose of UIL participation and competition. So Mac had gone through top surgery, which is removing your breasts, and even signed to attend and wrestle at Life University in Marietta, Georgia. But when people learned in January of 2017 that he had been taking low levels of testosterone to prepare for his top surgery, some complained that it would give him an unfair advantage, obviously, because he's a man becoming a woman. a woman becoming a man. And even though the UIL rules seem to be in place to protect female athletes from being beat out by boys, it was that very rule that kept him from competing, that kept him competing against the girls. So when Mac won his second state title, the crowd was loud with cheers and as well as boos. So I watched a video, and you can literally see like the hands raised in the air, and it is just so loud, and it's so hard to decipher who's cheering for him, her, who's cheering against him. So despite declaring publicly on multiple occasions that he would prefer to wrestle boys because he wants to become a boy, Max still faced the oppression from the media as well as fellow wrestlers and teams. So like Cece had mentioned, the idea of looking at yourself in the mirror and hating what you see, like that obviously can't be easy. The process of physically changing yourself to fit what you believe is on the inside can't be harder than the comments and responses from other people. Cece quotes, "I'm being bashed by the media. I'm being bashed by all the conservatives. I don't even see myself as trans. I see myself as female." And there's an added struggle when the world won't accept you for who you think that you are, who you feel like you need to be. For instance, in Mac's case, despite publicly stating that he would rather wrestle boys, he still faces scrutiny from the crowds. Even though the world tells people to live out their truth and find their happiness, the world will also point their finger and accuse you when you do, tell you that you're wrong when you do. In arguing why transgender people should be able to compete in athletics, the argument is primarily emotional, which isn't a bad argument by any means. It just doesn't seem as sturdy. So the Title IX, the most commonly used statute for inclusivity and against discrimination, states that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in or be denied the benefits of or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. As a human being, there is an inherent desire to belong and to be accepted, to love and to be loved. Just how Title IX has paved the way to allow women to compete in sport and be as successful, if not more successful than men, it is central to the argument that transgender athletes should have equal opportunity for success and for enjoyment within their sport. Having the opportunity to participate in sports creates better opportunities, and everyone deserves the right to participate in sports in a manner consistent with their gender identification, according to the GLSEN, which is the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network. And they say they should be able to compete on teams in line with their identity. The GLSEN also states that for LGBTQ students, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning, reports show that athletes have a GPA that is between 0.2 and 0.4 points higher on a 4.0 scale than students not participating in athletics. Also, 56% of LGBTQ members and 66% of team leaders competing in high school sports report feeling a positive sense of belonging at school, which, I mean, I was bullied in high school, so I totally understand that desire to belong, that desire to feel normal, and I can't even imagine what it would feel like not feeling like that, based off of myself, you know? So to deny students the right of competing and potentially feeling more comfortable in their skin, that wouldn't be fair. So again, the argument is very emotional. On the contrary, is it fair to allow a student who has been producing testosterone their whole life to compete against athletes who have not had that advantage? In 2014, transgender professional MMA fighter Fallon Fox beat Tamika Brents, giving her a concussion, broke her orbital bone, and a plethora of other injuries. In 2017, transgender weightlifter Laurel Hubbard set a number of world records and won the Commonwealth Games in Australia. In 2018, transgender cyclist Rachel McKinnon took first among the women at the UCI Masters Track Cycling World Championship. In 2018, before the USAPL changed their rules, J.C. Cooper, a transgender powerlifter, set records in women's bench press after only having powerlifted for a year. In February of 2019, two transgender girls took first and second place at the Connecticut State High School Track Championship. This is all stating that these trans women were born as male with XY chromosomes, having gone through puberty as a male, yet identified as a female. Most sporting federations state that trans females must suppress their testosterone production for a period of time. The International Olympic Committee requires that the athlete, quote, must demonstrate that her total testosterone level in serum has been below 10 milliliter, I never saw the actual term, but levels of 10 for at least 12 months prior to their first competition, which is all good and well. However, women don't produce nearly that much normally, like not even close. The Mayo Clinic Laboratory puts the range that biological women produce as 0.52 to 0.28. I think it's nanomoles of testosterone naturally, which is less than half of what a trans woman would have to be able to compete. On a scientific level, the transgender woman has an unfair advantage when it comes to competition. And you can argue emotionally no matter how much you want, but looking at the statistics, that's the truth. So Celine Stoll and Alana Smith, among others, are two athletes who have personally experienced this losing battle. In the 2019 indoor track and field state competition, Selena placed 1 away from qualifying for finals and 2 away from qualifying from the New England Regional Championship. In the 55-meter dash, the first and second place finishers were both born male. Alana won the 400-meter dash at the 74th New England Interscholastic Track and Field Championship in July as a freshman. Although she didn't have to compete against any males in her event, a male did compete and win the 200-meter dash. Alana understands that her achievements are threatened by the possibility of competing against born male competitors, and that she could potentially lose out on titles and even scholarships. Selena says that competing against transgender athletes is heartbreaking for biological girls because they know at the beginning of the race that no matter how hard they try, the biological male will win. And I think even now there's a spiritual aspect of this that plays into it, and obviously that's the lens that I'm going to look at it because I'm a Christian and I'm a practicing follower of Jesus, and I believe that he created men and women to be different. He created us to have different positives. He created us to have different strengths and weaknesses, and one of those is the fact that men are just biologically stronger and faster because they're supposed to be the hunter of the family kind of thing, to put it in old terms. Can't say that now, but so that being said, then there's the inclusion of the sexist sentiment. Along with the argument of people have the right to compete in the gender that they identify with comes the statement, it's just a game. Nobody tells the boys on a football field that they should take their sport less seriously. In fact, they encourage them to make their sport their life with the potential of a future career in professionalism. Yet we're telling women that their sport shouldn't matter enough that they make a fuss over a seemingly simple argument. And I've even faced that in my own life when I'll lose a game and I'll come off and people will be like, Rachel, why are you so mad? It's just a game. And you wouldn't say that to a guy that just lost the state football game. You wouldn't tell that to a little boy who just lost his t-ball game. So why are we making it okay to say that to women in athletics? The message that's communicated to the other women competing is that they don't matter. Their opinion does not matter. Their potential future in the sport doesn't matter. Their potential future in general doesn't matter. What it communicates is anyone is welcome into the sport, and that guideline should be ignored. However, this welcome this welcomes not only the meek but also the bold. Gabriella Ludwig, formerly known as Robert Ludwig, was a 52-year-old 6'8" transgendered woman, and she joined the San Joaquin Delta College in Northern California because she wanted to go to school and play basketball. Because of her sex change operation and birth certificate change, she was allowed to get her previous sport history removed. So Robert Ludwig had played basketball in 1980 at Nassau Community College. Looking at this objectively, this is a grown man who still had male genitalia, competing against college-age women and sharing a locker room with college-age women, which is ridiculous. If there are loose guidelines in place for how much testosterone transgender women can have in competition, then the loose guidelines will bleed over into completely disregarding common sense and allowing a grown man onto a college women's basketball game. This poses questions such as, if grown men are allowed to compete in women's sports, will this create a steroid use problem among women athletes in trying to keep up with the men? Is wanting fairness for biological women who are physically set up to fail against men transphobic? In no way is anyone saying that trans people should not compete. However, they should be able to just do it in an arena that is tailored to their circumstances. Just how there is a completely separate Olympic Games set up for people with disabilities, there should be another division for trans people who are hoping to compete. Not saying that that's a disability by any means, but it just creates proper guidelines for their situation. The argument could be that women would get fed up and stop competing to the degree that it would just be trans people anyway. Unfortunately, in today's society, inclusion is only one way, and that if you stand up for biological women rights as many professional female athletes have, you will get pegged as transphobic and shunned by the LGBT community, which is a lot bigger than it seems. And there must be a middle ground to be found where transgender feel as though they fit into society and the competition is still fair. As a female college athlete, my stance is pretty heavily weighed against allowing transgender athletes to compete in athletics, if you can't tell. However, I realize that it's a harsh reality to try and say to people. And as a Christian female athlete, I must tread lightly. My purpose on this earth is not to win gold or to dominate on the lacrosse field or to get all the accolades to prove that I am better than everyone else, as much as I wish that was it. My sole purpose is to create disciples of Jesus Christ, and I can't do that when I'm wagging my finger and telling someone that they're wrong, losing that relationship in the process. Having considered both sides, it's really hard because I am so inclined to immediately disagree with how seemingly outrageous it sounds, yet I'm scared that in my disagreement, I peg myself as a transphobic jerk, and I've just lost any ability to witness from here on out. As an athlete, however, I have to see the facts as they are. There are so many advantages that trans women have against biological women. So trans women going from men to women have against someone who is born and stayed a woman. I believe that there are fundamental differences that sex one is born with and the gender that they identify with. I agree that every human being deserves to feel included. However, I think that some of those rights are lost when you decide to change, when you decide to go through that process of changing. I can come to terms with a man feeling like a woman or vice versa on the inside, but that doesn't give you the right to compete against other women who have significantly less testosterone than you and are created completely different. And again, that's coming from my Christian worldview, so I believe that there's a creator, and I believe that we are creations, and that there's purpose behind the way that we were made. So creation is a completely different conversation in and of itself. As a Christian woman, again, I believe that God is the author of the universe and he created each and every person just the way that they are. Psalm 139:13-14 states, "For you, God, created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well." This states that God creates everyone specifically and intentionally, and he doesn't mess up. God can't make mistakes. I also believe, and this is my personal belief, not backed by scripture or theology, but just how I have come to understand sin and the conversations that I've had with people who struggle with this, that each person is born with specific sin inclinations. So while one person may really struggle with lying throughout their life, and another person can have a hard time with anger, and another person can have a really difficult time controlling their lust, in the same way, someone can be born with an inclination to be attracted to someone of the same sex, or to hate themselves to the point that they find solace in altering who they are and creating a new identity, kind of trying to start over. But this doesn't justify the underlying sin. Just because I'm uncomfortable doesn't mean that I'm allowed to go against the creator of the universe, to go against God. As much as I would love to get on board and encourage people to live their best lives and do what they can to make themselves happy because that sounds easy, I'm confronted with scripture telling me that my life is not meant for my happiness, but my purpose in life is God's glory. Whether or not my faith is a coping mechanism, which is something that I've really struggled with recently, or God really is who he says he is, I've chosen to live my life according to his scripture and according to his rules. And I believe that transgenderism is a sin, and therefore I'm unable to support transgender athletes in competing in athletics against biological males and females. That's my research. Have a good day.